This meeting is being live streamed. Got it? Okay, I think we're getting ready to go live. We are indeed live. Greetings, greetings, family. Sister Shanice in the house alongside our brother Rasul. We are live using a different platform again today, using Zoom, because unfortunately we did have some challenges with our other platform, as you heard last strong. So reverting to Zoom for this show, and let's hope that it is a good one. So spread the words, family. Let everybody know that we are indeed live, coming to you live and direct. I'm just going to copy the link and share it. And let me go over to Brother Rasul. Greetings, Brother Rasul. How are you doing? All the way from South Africa.
Greetings, Sister Shanice, and to the listeners and viewers. I think it's good to be here. It's good for us to be exchanging thoughts. It's good for us to be exploring new information and education and finding ourselves, our true selves.
Yes, indeed. And you know, what's really, really important as well about these opportunities and these get-togethers is that we come together from across the waters, across the seas, and, you know, we can speak to each other face to face. It's absolutely fantastic. You know, I'm in the Gambia, you're in South Africa. Here we are communicating with our brothers and sisters from around the world. And so, family, as you come into the chat, please do let us know that you're picking us up. Let us know how we're sounding. Hopefully we're coming over loud and clear. Drop us a message in the chat. So let me just find you as well in the live chat. Yeah, how are we coming over? Let us know. Kimani's in the house. Rise up, Kimani. He's the first one to message us live and direct. So I know we are indeed connected. Oh, brother Rasul, South Africa, a lot going on there right now. I see Julius Malema is in the dock. What's going on in there, please, my brother? You know, give us a little bit of an insight as to what's happening on the ground out there in South Africa. As our people come in, please just share with us some news from South Africa.
Well, I think South Africa is very turbulent. It's at a very turbulent time where we're trying to find our way, and everybody, including the political opportunists, are doing the best to sort of get into the limelight, because just now it's going to be election time and they're starting to build up election currency. Now, as politicized and political people, because if you see our record, you'll find that we're protesting almost the highest in the world. Why do we protest? Because we're very political. We think politically, we analyze politically, and we look at our situation politically, and we speak as we should be speaking in the political voice. Now, when we look at our politics, and we look at the politics, for example, that border on xenophobia and are xenophobic or Afrophobic, we have to then begin to ask ourselves, where are we heading to in the future? This, as people talk Pan-Africanism and the unity of the continent, whilst at the same time barring and throwing out people that we consider to be foreigners in our country. Now, it's always going to give us the same kind of complexity when we value or weigh up nationalism as opposed to continentalism. And this is where we are standing at this point, and we seem almost schizophrenic to have two identities that talk left and walk right.
Wow, wow. Wow, a very troublesome situation. We've all seen the really awful scenes from South Africa in the past, you know, that are xenophobic related, and we certainly do not want to return to that. So it's really, really important that any narrative that goes out, you know, is one that's talking about, you know, us being united as Africa, the Ubuntu kind of spirit, irrespective of where we're born, you know, on the continent or in the diaspora. We are one as a people. And that message is critical, especially when you're living amongst those who would want to divide us so they can continue to rule us. We all know that strategy of divide and rule, and we've got to absolutely, haven't we, make sure that we don't fall, you know, into that trap. And that's really, you know, going to be the heart of our conversation today, really, the new face of neo-colonialism. So looking forward to us having that discussion. We're going to be starting that talk in a very short while. Let me just see how we're getting on in the chat, see if our family are finding us. Sister Afrojamo is in the house. Rise up, Sister Afrojamo. You found us. Just to let you know, Russell, the family have been having some challenges finding us over the last couple of strongs because I was using a different platform and we were having some challenges with connections, you know, and they are overhauling their platform. It's a Pan-African platform. And of course, they're going to be open to cyber attacks, but they're overhauling it, improving their security. And as soon as they're done, we will be going right back to that platform. But for now, we are, as you can see, live and direct via Zoom. So family, spread the word. Let the family and friends know that we are live and that they can certainly find us here on Zoom. We have our brother Rasul in the house and rearing to go. You know, others, they're going to have to catch up. They're going to catch us on catch up because, you know, I do not want to take up any time because we have such an important conversation that we're going to have today. As I said, the topic for conversation is neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism, the new beast of the 21st century. Let's welcome our brother Rasul all the way from South Africa. My brother Rasul, I know you were born in Grenville, Durban, South Africa. And so you would have had first-hand experience growing up, you know, in the apartheid era. I wonder if you could share with us briefly, you know, what life was like growing up back then in South Africa.
Well, if one starts at one's youth, we were born into a society that was pluralistic, that lived with all people together. We lived, for example, with white people, black people, Chinese people, purple people, if there were such people. And it was a really good existence. When we had neighbors, they were just human beings who lived alongside us. Then along came apartheid. Apartheid then gave us the kind of living that separated us on physical characteristics and said, you have this color, you have these characteristics, this is who you are. This is how we decide who you are. And they took away the sense of agency that we should have. And they put us into racial categories whereby they divided us, and we responded by equally falling into the trap of being divided. I recall, for example, we lived in a very multiracial area, and where we would catch our buses at the bus rank was a myriad of different peoples that lived together doing a myriad of different things. And it was rich culturally, it was very, very, very rich. And one sort of exchanged the values, one exchanged the neighborly kindness, one exchanged, for example, the knowledge that we're human. You know, like I always remember, Robert Sobukwe said, there's only one race, the human race. And we, at that particular point in time, lived that kind of philosophy, that kind of ideology of one race. Then, when things began to change, we began to see each other on physical characteristics, because what the then government did, it then used nationalism. I'm going to use the term nationalism to point out that nationalism is in itself a particularly despicable kind of existence, because it takes one people based on a certain criteria and places them as the only people in the center of humanity, and therefore, if there are any resources, they should be directed to those people, and those people are superior to other people. And that you'll find as nationalistic as wherever you get, where an Englishman will tell you, I'm better than you because I'm an Englishman, and an American would say, I'm better than you because I'm an American. Yet that is, for example, could be a false identity. If, for example, the people that really should have said, I belong here, are the indigenous people of the Americas, not really the American whites, because the American white is a national American. He's not an indigenous American by birth or by genetics or by any other way, whether you call that history or otherwise. So the definitions of nationalism need to be explored, and they need to be interpreted by people in various contexts so that people understand the good and the bad. The good side is, if you're in a good national existence, everybody is the same because you're living there. In a bad national existence, it separates people and makes them monsters to one another based on the fact that I'm English or I'm American and I'm African or you are XYZ, which defeats the philosophy of one race. So we need to rethink. We have to do a lot of introspection.
Absolutely agree with you on that, my brother. And, you know, on the continent of Africa, for example, it could be argued that there are many nationalities, but we are one people. But if there are those who can come among us and have us fighting each other on the basis of our nationality, then the age-old divide and rule, divide and conquer prevails. And that's how, you know, they have for centuries managed to actually divide us as a people and keep us separated as a people. So the whole concept of nationalism and how it's being used to divide us as a people and get in the way of our unity, I think definitely needs to be discussed and explored more. And the realization of it, I feel, needs to be highlighted as you're doing now. Because, you know, first and foremost, I believe as melanated people, we have to see ourselves as one people, you know, wherever we are in the world. Otherwise, we will continue to see those really awful things that we've seen in the past of xenophobia happening. Let's not allow our nationality to get in the way of who we are as one people. And my brother, I would imagine that growing up in South Africa, wow, because there are those of us who, you know, live outside of South Africa who have kind of followed the news for decades maybe, and may be aware of, you know, some of the past incidences in South Africa. And as you were growing up, I would imagine that these past incidences kind of shaped who you are a bit to a large extent. I wonder if you can tell us maybe what sort of incident stands out the most for you during your times growing up in South Africa that you feel maybe has profoundly shaped your politics and your views and your perspective on issues.
Well, there were numerous incidents that affected us that would be collectively shaping who and what we are. The one thing that stands out is the fact of the matter is we had the pass law, for example, and the pass law was something the freedom of movement, for example. And I once had an incident where someone who was my second mother, a helper of ours, Woody, was in fact arrested by what they call the Blackjacks. The Blackjacks were neo-colonial people who worked in the interests of white society to oppress Black people or oppress African people and enforced the law. And now this made us very aware of the fact that even those who you deem to be your people fall under a system that compels you to oppress your own people in the name of someone else. And that began to make me aware.
Yes, carry on.
That began to make me aware of the concept of neo-colonialism, for example, where those who aid the colonial forces are from your people. And this you'd see in every struggle. You'd see in the Mau Maus, for example, it was the same, the divide and conquer. They just used different methodologies, which means for a salary, they paid you a salary, they gave you a uniform, they made you live in a better area. And for that salary and those little perks, you were quite prepared to oppress someone else. And that taught us against our teachings at home that everybody is human and everybody should have the right to live as a human being in the best way possible that he deems fit as a human being, not as the state deems fit. So that was a challenge for us on how we think. And I must say, I had a brilliant mother who was very, very politicized, not in the ideological Frantz Fanon kind of politics, but in the politics of humanity. Because where I lived, we had people who used to go into the struggle, and I was quite a young boy. And they used to sleep over we had goats, so they used to sleep over in the goat house, come late at night and leave early in the morning. And I was a bit of a naughty youngster, and I was given the task of taking these people down to a place that later became a township. And that became my first brush with people in the struggle. For example, I was a 10-year-old boy, and a grown man of these people, gave me a Webley a firearm. I was 10 years old.
Wow.
You know, so this influenced me, and it showed me that people resist in every way that they can. And it made me later on feel proud of the fact that I did do something. It made me also understand my mother's politics of aiding in some way. It's like Harriet Tubman and the slave train. You know, it was that kind of scenario. And I think there were lots of people who added in that way to the struggles that happened. When I grew a bit older, they created a place called KwaMashu, and they started dividing people at this point. And I used to go on holiday to KwaMashu. We still lived in a place called Newlands East, and not Newlands East, just Newlands. They used to call it Seacow Lake. That was a multi-area, but they were now starting to separate people. And I went there, and I spent time in the locations from this peri-urban area or the peri-rural area that I was in. And I began to see what the township life was about. I began to see ghetto living, so to speak. And I began to see the violence that began to take place in these areas. And we got sucked into this violence as well. So it made us rethink what we thought at that time. The whole concept of us being a nice, holistic society was slowly being destroyed, law by law, act by act. And imperceptibly, the background changed. Then we couldn't go to town, for example. By 9 o'clock, we had to be out of town. We couldn't use toilets. We couldn't sit on benches. We couldn't visit our friends. We had police who would say to us, why are you in this area? Because they categorized us racially different. And we had to get consent to go from here to there. I remember one incident, for example, like a company used to have its Christmas dance. And what happened is they had to actually make an application to have 6 white people present in that event, and they weren't allowed by law to dance. So this was the incongruity of the laws. I remember being from Durban, it wasn't so bad, but when I went to a place called, not Bloemfontein, I think it was Bethlehem. I went to a place in Bethlehem, and the shop was open, but you couldn't come in because you're black, and you had to go to a little hole, and they take your money through there and serve you through there. It was the most, one of the most dehumanizing experiences we had. So what we did, a group of friends and I walked into the front. We took what we wanted by force. We paid for it, and we dropped deliberately a couple of bottles of Coke on the floor, and it messed up the entire white section, so to speak. And they then got us out of town. They called the police, and the police got us out of town, and we were escorted out of town. And we couldn't be in town for later than 9 p.m. And this was terrible to have this done to you in your own land. You know, even if you were not political, as a human being, you'd see that the politics of the day were affecting people negatively because people began to feel less human. People began to see themselves as inferior. People began to see themselves as chattel, as possessions, as people who only spend their money in shops but are not human beings in shops.
Wow. Wow. You know, my brother, I can't even begin to imagine what that experience must have been like in your own country. You know, people who you've allowed to come in and settle among you, then turn around and start treating the indigenous people in that way. Wow, wow, wow. And then, you know, to have your own people as well who are acting as enforcers, you know, and enforcing those laws and those rules as well against their own people. You know, it goes back to a term that, you know, we're using quite a bit on my radio station, the Big G Galaxy FOE, where, you know, we're saying that a lot of what happens to us couldn't happen to us if people who didn't look like us were not collaborating, you know, with those who want to oppress us. And that we have had for centuries among us those who have a treasonous trait. And this treasonous trait still exists until today. But, you know, I think we're going to be exposing this trait to a large extent in the discussion that we have on neo-colonialism, because, you know, there should be some boundaries that we do not cross. You know, why are we enforcing dehumanizing laws and policies and regulations on behalf of oppressors against our own people? You know, those of us who ended up being enslaved know that there's no way that that could not have happened had there not been collaboration, you know, and collaborators exist until today. There is a treasonous, treacherous trait, unfortunately, among our people. And how we deal with that particular trait, I'm open to suggestions. Family in the chat, if you have any suggestions and any ideas, how we deal with the treasonous, treacherous trait that exists among us as a people. Let us know your comments and your thoughts. Let's go over to the chat for a little while, actually. Let's see how it's warming up. Welcome, welcome to everyone who is watching us live and direct. We have Sister Afri Jamal in the house. We have JJ saying, good evening, family members. Lady V saying, greetings, Sister Shanice and guests. And she's watching us from the Gambia. Looking forward to the show and hearing us loud and clear. Thanks for that. We have the Black Acres of the Gambia in the house. One of my favorite YouTubers. Love, love, love. Rise up, family. Black Acres of the Gambia in the house. We have Africa Reimagined, one of our regular guests in the house. Welcome. He's saying, beautiful, hearing us loud and clear today. Fantastic. And yeah, please do share the link. We do know we have had challenges in the past since the challenges started before I left off at the end of last year, and he rejoined me when I got back on. But Zoom seems to be okay today. Let's see how long that lasts for. Rise up, Sister Afrijamo. And let's welcome Rooney B in the house, who says multiculturalism is genocidal to indigenous populations. Be careful, Africa. Let's have a little bit of a conversation on that, because, you know, I suppose multiculturalism is something that could have been preached to the original Africans, who they call the Indians of America. Multiculturalism could have been preached to the originals in Australia. Look what happened to them. Multiculturalism, you know, to the original Caribs. Look what happened to them, the original Europeans. Is multiculturalism suicidal? Let us know your views on that in the house as well. Let me quickly just go over to our guest, Brother Rasul. Multiculturalism, genocidal to the indigenous people. What say you, Brother Rasul?
Indigenous people, I don't think multiculturalism in itself is dangerous. I think when it becomes an imposition on people and destroys their culture to supplant it with another culture, then it becomes dangerous. Humanity has always been moving around, and culture is not static. Culture changes all the time. Like for example, what I do, I get children and I get them to tell me stories off the top of their heads, just to say whatever they want. And I write children's stories as well. And what happens is culture is changing. I mean, right now, if you go into the culture, you'll find people who had never used the words delete and SMS and cell phone are using those terms. So culturally, we change. It's never static, or else we'd be doing what the very first human did, was eat raw meat, so to speak. One's culture, no one can divest you of your culture unless it's done legally. Like for example, as Khoisan people, if we spoke our language, they used to hammer out our teeth to destroy our culture, because the colonial forces felt that they couldn't understand what we were saying and we were plotting against them, so to speak. So culture in itself, I do not see cultural exchanges as being bad, because if we look at the development of Pan-Africanism, for example, we're going to have a mixture of cultures, and those cultures will feed off each other to form a culture. And if you look at culture, culture has values, certain values that are never changing, like be good to your neighbor. If someone comes into your neighborhood, you give him a hoe and something to plant. You give him a piece of land. That's the Ubuntu, what we call Ubuntu, of the native, as so to speak. And that is something that we've always had. We might have different ways of dressing, we might have different ways of killing chickens and so on and so forth, or getting married, or whatever the case may be. But underneath that, the true cultural values never disappear. In fact, they're common human values, and they were with our ancestors from time immemorial, and they'll never change unless we adapt to the modern world and start taking materialism and nationalism over our being human beings. So I don't see culture as a threat at all, but I see the imposition of culture as something destructive.
Rise up. Thank you so much for that, Brother Rasool. And as he was talking there as well, I realized that, we're looking at this from different parts of the world. And so, for example, from a Western perspective, from the UK, when we talk about multiculturalism, it's kind of like this idea that there's one big melting pot and all the different cultures, the blacks, the whites, the Indians, the Chinese, all the cultures kind of melt together in one big melting pot. And that's the idea of multiculturalism. Whereas from an African continental perspective, for example, where I am in the Gambia, we have many different cultures here, the Wolofs, the Jolas, the Mandinkas, the Siris, loads of different cultures, and they all celebrate their cultures and are very proud of their different cultures, their different language, maybe slightly different variation in the food they eat, the way they cook it, how they celebrate, how they dance. And that idea of multiculturalism, I think I heard as you was talking, is very different from our perspective, from the Western perspective of multiculturalism. I think what we call multiculturalism, you might understand more of as integrationism, and integrating with non-Africans, and the dangers, if we put integration ahead of maybe separation and maintaining our racial identity. But that's a whole nother discussion, a really interesting one. But we won't go into that right now. I'm already saying, family, we have to invite our brother Rasool back, because time is going to go too quickly on this one. We do have our second guest that will be joining us at 8 o'clock, and we haven't even got into the meat of the discussion as yet. We're still learning a little bit about our brother Rasool. We'll learn a little bit more, and then we're going to go over to the discussion. Brother Rasool, you are an author. You've written several books, stories, novels, articles, adventures, even a science fiction. Please let people know where they can find your works, and maybe just mention a little bit about one or two of those pieces.
Well, what I've done, I'm a bit of a lazy author. Because I write my works and I don't bother to chase people to publish my works. I'm working on about 17 stories, 17 different stories.
Wow.
Some are at all different stages of development. Like, for example, I'm doing a fantasy story that is almost like Lord of the Rings. It's gone quite a bit, and it's going to be three segments.
Wow.
I'm doing a science fiction story because I'm very intrigued by science. For example, I'm looking at, for example, androids, how human androids are becoming. And now we have AI. Will it develop a consciousness? How does it fit into the African paradigm? Who begins to underwrite and write the software? You know, can we bring that about in the African Renaissance, so to speak? Or are we going to discard it and say we don't want technology because we're anti-technology, we are African? You know, so there are multiple challenges that are coming to us, and I'm not too sure how we're going to grapple with it. But I'd like to prepare our people. I'd like to bring them mentally to a point where they can conceive the inconceivable. For example, we tend to look at conception in the general sense that the womb, there's conception using the uterus to the womb, etc., etc. But what if it isn't so? What will Africa do? What if we go and have test tubes and have laboratories and have children on order, so to speak? What will happen to the African life? You know, will the family value drop? Will it change? How will it change? So there's a lot of interesting things that need to be taken into account. And we as African people need to catch up and go ahead and begin to understand what exactly technology means to us and how do we embrace it and how do we shape it and change it to be an African value. Because as we spoke earlier, we spoke about culture. Culture, you spoke about cultural diversity. Cultural diversity is brilliant, but underneath the cultural diversity is the cultural value. Now, the cultural value is what keeps us alive as Africans, that keeps us African in the Ubuntu context. Now, if we say we have the cultural values, then what we'll be is better human beings. Now, if we better human beings, will we be better human beings within the technological framework? Or will we abandon our culture? Do we feel we're weak enough to lose our values, or do we feel strong enough to keep our values no matter what? So it's a deep question. There are lots of things we need to unpack. And we cannot think that we've reached the end of history or the end of knowing ourselves and saying our culture should be frozen in time. And this is what constitutes our culture. Our culture will change, but the values won't change.
Wow,
so, yeah.
We're going to have to, this is going to be a really interesting topic for discussion. I think we need to return to that. Lots of comments on multiculturalism in the chat. I'll just bring out one or two. JJ says, Martin Luther King admitted making a mistake with integration of his people into a burning house. Yeah, so we have to see the advantages and the disadvantages. Mr. Wilfred, welcome. He's saying, never accept the colonizer's definition stroke version of multiculturalism. T-Pat says, we have to separate from the devil, and there's an image of the devil there. Kwame Ossie, welcome, saying, multiculturalism is dangerous because in the UKKK, they promote the dominant culture, history, tradition, religion, etc. Sandra says, multiculturalism is a given position of and from the oppressor. Until positions are made and practices equally from all forms, it will remain an imposition. Those are just some of the comments there regarding multiculturalism. Rooney says multiculturalism from a Western perspective is also synonymous of genetic wipeout. That's the extent to which multiculturalism is being used as a weapon of mass destruction in the West. So, but this is a good topic we're going to come back to. But let's move over, my brother Rasool, if that's okay with you. Thanks for sharing some of your experiences growing up in South Africa, giving us a bit of an insight in what's happening there, and sharing a little bit of the great works that you're doing, working on 17 books simultaneously. Oh my days. Okay, so let's go into the topic for discussion today, which is about the new form of imperialism and colonization. First of all, my brother, I wonder if you could just share with us what your perspective is on imperialism. What is imperialism?
I think in a broader sense, it's about power. Imperialism is about power and how power goes through various stages and it changes. And society in itself has to recognize and understand those changes. If we don't recognize those changes, then imperialism will be upon us, just like neo-colonialism is upon us, and we begin to oppress ourselves. If you go back and you read people like Frantz Fanon was a great psycho-thinker, psycho-political thinker. And what he spoke about was something called the psychology of the oppressed. Now, we have to understand what the psychology of the oppressed means, because it's when the oppressed begin to oppress themselves. And we have to understand that imperialism is psychological imperialism. It's something that happens in your mind. It's where people agree to a king and then subscribe to the king and fight for the king and die for the king and pay taxes to the king. That was an older form of imperialism. In Britain, we saw that kind of imperialism translate into colonialism. For example, we saw it in Spain, we saw it in Portugal, we saw it in Holland. Now, that was when they did it at the behest of the Queen, whether it was Queen Isabella or Queen Elizabeth or whoever was in power at that particular time. They felt that they should make all other countries who are seen as lesser countries as their subjects and vassals, whilst they looted the countries and took the resources. Now, imperialism is always about economics. Colonialism is about economics. And if you look at democracy, democracy is the new imperialism that disguises itself as humanitarianism, but isn't. Actually is exploitative and is exactly the same as the monarchic version, because all you do is elect your king and he rules you for 5 years and he extracts your wealth, he extracts your resources, he treats you like a serf. But it's democratic. Now again, I'll speak to Frantz Fanon, who says the oppressed oppress themselves because of the psychology of oppression. Now, the psychology of oppression means the first battle is in our minds. If we as society reject the imperial concept that one man is born with blue blood and you are born with red blood, then obviously it would not work. But there is an acceptance of that kind of rationale where we begin to accept that one man has blue blood and his children and his children's children can rule over your children and they have the rights to all your affairs. Now, when we look at imperialism from a monarchic point of view, we've got to understand what it was, because it didn't have a color. For example, the British imperial forces made and subjugated the white people. They subjugated the white people. And for example, I'll give you a very, very clear example of one case where the kings or the royal class or the royalty class or the ruling class had a law called first right. The law of first right meant if you were in the kingdom or the lands of the Lord and you got married, the Lord had the first right to sleep with your wife. Now, how can society allow that to happen becomes the question, because if society rejected that, the king, being just one person, has no one to make him king or keep him king. The Lord cannot be Lord unless the people agree. So it's the psychology of the oppressed that gives power to the imperial conquerors. And therefore, we have to have the psychology of resistance, the psychology of strength. And if you take this into, let's say, the cultural field, we have to have the psychology of our culture from a strong point of view, not to be dominated by anyone, nor to have our identities erased, nor to have our human values erased. So that is cultural from a monarchic point of view. We then go to imperialism by countries like Japan, by countries like America, for example. That's imperialism, but it's under a different guise. Now we find, for example, imperialism calls itself the war on terror. Imperialism calls itself aid, because that's another instrument of imperialism. First, they destroy your country, and then they say they're aiding you, but by and large, they're taking your resources. It's a game, it's a scam. Malcolm X would say we're being bamboozled. And we're being bamboozled. The IMF, for example, is a thug. The World Bank is a thug. You get people called, what do you call these? Voucher funders. You call them voucher funders. They buy the debts of countries and they control the governments. Now, we haven't as yet gotten to the point where we have begun to interpret imperialism and colonialism in its proper context. What we do instead is become reactors to colonialism. We become commentators to colonialism, but we don't build structures because the sense of agency is taken away from you. For example, if you say, you know, education is bad, we don't build a Pan-Africanist university. Yet we introduced universities to the European. If we go back into, let's say, Timbuktu, we had people who had many universities. The people like Socrates, for example, Plato, and so on and so forth, learned from us. But they now have universities and they teach us, they shape us, they make us what they want to do. So this is a character imperialism, it's a psychological imperialism, it's an educational imperialism, and we don't see it. For example, we have so many values that are taken from us and they are supplanted with something else. Now, when we look at, for example, colonialism or monarch imperialism, we must see we had a point where Europeans as a whole, Europe as a whole colonized us. And it was the imperial driving force. And it had Britain, France, Belgium, Holland, Spain as the major drivers. And what it does, it subhumanizes us. It takes us down to the point where we are considered subhuman, and it is bringing wisdom to us. It is bringing education to us. It is bringing religion to us. And we buy that. That's why today we are more religious than the Europeans, for example. And they taught us a philosophy and a religion where if someone slaps your left cheek, you give them your right cheek. Then you obey your master, you know, and if he takes 1 acre of land, you give him 2 acres of land. So we've been subjugated mentally to such an extent that we don't realize it. Like, you know, I always think of Harriet Tubman, who said, I freed 1,000 slaves and I could free 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. Now, the new imperialism convinces us that it's good, it's in our favor, it's there to make it better for us. For example, we take aid. There you have an instance of France. France takes our GDP, all the money gets banked in France, and then it gives us back our own money as loans, and those loans come with terms and conditions. Now, when are we going to realize that we're being conned, we're being bamboozled, and when are we going to awaken? Now, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Again, what happens, it takes complicity on our side to make the imperial machinery work. For example, if you look at Kenya, you look at the Mau Maus in Kenya, you'll find that they took certain tribes, and those tribes were the buffer between them and the Mau Mau tribes that they wanted to subjugate. If you look at Congo, if you go anywhere, you'll see exactly the same pattern happens, and it happens here. And that leads us to the concept of neo-colonialism, because that is a natural outcome of imperialism, just as the European royalty or the royalty class collapsed. You know, the Europeans woke up and they started killing their kings. For example, the French beheaded Louis, you know, and many other instances where they dethroned their kings. But that didn't stop the colonial project. That didn't stop the imperial project. The imperial project continued. So you had democratic imperialism as opposed to having the old monarchic imperialism. But imperialism continued and it never ever stopped. Now, that will take you immediately to Africa. I won't talk about Latin America, I'll talk about Africa, because if you look at between 1815 and 1914, Britain brought nearly 30% of Africa's population under its control, to 15% for France, 9% for Germany, 7% for Belgium, and 1% for Italy. Nigeria alone contributed 15 million subjects to Britain, more than the whole of French West Africa. The entire German colonial or the entire German colonial empire, the only people were not Liberia and Ethiopia. Now, when we look at this, there's also like wars, outright wars, because one has to look at imperialism. There's hard and soft imperialism. The hard imperialism, they'll come, they'll conquer, they'll take your resources. The softer version of imperialism is that they'll tell you they came to help you, but they'll still take your resources. So it's a matter of how they robbed you. Not whether they were not going to rob you, it was how they robbed you. And this we fell for, because what they did, they then said, we came to help you, but what we'll do, we'll give your rulers so much to allow us to help you. And they robbed us. Now, again, we go back to the concept of neo-colonialism. We go back to the concept of our own people betraying us and being collaborators. All the time, we go back to exactly the same thing. And we'll find that our people, for petty power, will give away the kingdoms, will give away the countries, will give away the continents, for example. And we've seen this being done on the AU. You know, is the AU representing Africa, or is the AU another imperial instrument? For example, we have to begin to ask these questions. Now, we've got to look at, for example, a lot of the Barbary Wars. And if you look at the Barbary Wars, it's when Britain wanted Africa, the higher end of Africa, what they call the Sahel regions going up. Now, when we go further, we go the occupation of Egypt, the building of the Suez Canal, the conquering of Sudan for shoulder, and South Africa, for example, and the rest. We have to look at why did they do this? And underneath it all, you'd find that economics are the things that drive imperialism. Economics. For example, Leopold in Belgium, for example, came to Africa not as a conqueror, he came as a humanitarian. And he came to liberalize Africa, liberate Africa and bring it to Christendom, so to speak. But what did he do? He raped the woman, he murdered the children, he held the children hostage, and he cut off the hands of men who couldn't deliver, even children who couldn't bring their rubber quota. Now, we have to understand that imperialism for us is the iron fist. But what they do, they put a velvet glove over the iron fist. So we see the velvet glove and say it's not imperialism, but underneath is the iron fist, and we need to begin to understand that. When we go, for example, to what do you call this, Berlin Conference, because we have to realize that the Europeans were fighting amongst themselves over who owns what over Africans, you know, and therefore they had to divide it, and people knew what they were doing so that they continue to, amongst themselves, continue to rule and exploit without fighting, because imperialists fought wars as well. And we have to ensure that we know these imperialists and what they did, because between them both, whilst fighting their wars, they used our people. They used to co-opt us in their armies. And many of us joined their armies. If you look at, for example, when they couldn't, like as Bushman people, we know they couldn't track us. but they co-opted some other people to track us, which meant we then began to suffer at their hands because we had someone assisting them, giving them powers that they didn't have without our cooperation and our collaboration. And what did they get? They got stationed in the ranks of the so-called imperialists. And now we see the same thing. Before a president comes into power, he has to go to Britain, get blessed by the British, and then he comes into power, or not, he gets removed. Now, this will take us over what kinds of imperialisms there are, because imperialism uses a number of things, a number of weapons that it uses against us as the people. It uses trade, for example. It uses culture. It uses, for example, war. It uses aid. All of these are tools that the imperial forces uses. It uses banks. It uses the IMF and the World Bank. Those are its tools. And if we are aware of the World Bank, we'll know that it gives you loans that you cannot afford to pay. And when you can't pay them, it lends you more money to repay it, which they call rollover finance, and our leaders buy it. Now, everywhere you turn, you come to the leadership question, because they couldn't do it without the help that they get from the fifth column. And the fifth column that we have are leaders, and the kinds of leaders we elect. And why we elect the leaders is because of the psychology of oppressed people. We're worrying about bread and butter, they're having cake. Exactly what was said by Marie Antoinette, give them cake. You know, when are we going to realize the cake belongs to us, the bakery belongs to us, the flour belongs to us, the fields belong to us, the wheat belongs to us. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. So they bribe us. They bribe us with little things like grocery packages and so on and so forth. They say, vote for me, and then they sell the country away to someone else. So amongst all this is the fact that we have treasonous leaders, and we do not hold our leaders accountable and charge them with treason. For example, if you look at Africa, we had what they call regicide. Regicide is where you had a king, and if that king betrayed the people in any manner whatsoever or didn't deliver, he was ritualistically killed. That's regicide. And we haven't yet understood the power of removing people, and therefore we find we have neo-colonial powers sitting for 3 or 4 or 5 elections, and they just stay in power. We can't get rid of them. In the meanwhile, they're plundering the resources, they're impoverishing the people, and they're pushing the people backwards, because all the resources that leave our continent are not resources that are replenishable. They're finite, and they go out and they don't come back. And they go out in the form of schools, they go out in education, they go in advancement, they go in a number of ways that could have benefited us. Therefore, when we poor, we cannot say we poor because of natural and normal circumstances. We poor because of imperialism. We poor because of colonialism. We poor because of neo-colonialism. And we, the people, have to get rid of the psychology of the oppressed and start taking on a psychology of warriors, of understanding that our leaders are accountable to us. Our resources belong to us. We're not doing our leaders a favor by giving them the diamonds. We're not doing our leaders a favor by allowing them to give away our diamonds to someone else. And there you can see in the Congo, planes go in and out of the Congo, taking the diamonds of the Congolese people to Israel, for example, for polishing. So we've got to build the idea that Pan-Africanism as a functional philosophy has to be brought into play, because we have to build capacity, we have to build power, we have to build intellect. And I'm saying intellect because we have to start thinking. We gave the whole of civilization a life. We gave it education, we gave it cognition. And now it's turned the tables, and through the industrial revolution has now subjugated us, and we are where we are. So in our minds, we need to fight our first battle.
Wow.
I don't know, is that enough?
Wow, wow, wow. Brother Rasool, I mean, the teaching was just profound. I mean, there was just so much to unpack there. There really, really is. I mean, this is a new concept for me, psychological imperialism, and how we oppress ourselves as a people and how we make ourselves the subject of oppression. Oh my God, you know, and we're 5 minutes away from the top of the hour where we bring our next speaker in who's already waiting backstage. And we haven't even had an opportunity to begin to have a dialogue with you on all of what you have just presented. We're gonna have to invite you back. But let me just go over to the chat, my brother, and pick up some of the comments. And Brother Kabala, backstage, we will be bringing you on. Do you mind if he joins us front stage? We'll just bring him in to the meeting room with us and allow him to join us here. But wow, wow, wow. Brother Rasool, that presentation was phenomenal, so deeply insightful. I knew it was going to be, you know, insightful. I knew there was going to be a lot that we want to unpack here. Let me go over to the chat and pick up some of the comments there and hear what's been said there. And I also have a couple of comments as well that I'd like to bring in. Welcome, Brother Kabala. We will be coming over to you in a very short while. Good to see you in the house, my brother. Were you able to hear Brother Rasool's presentation, by the way?
Yeah, peace and peace, of course.
You heard some of it. Okay, that's good. Okay, we're hearing you a little low, so when we go over to you, we'll have to raise the volume. Okay, my brother, but good to see you in the house.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thank you too. So let's hear what our audience has to say in response to Brother Rasool's presentation there on imperialism. Senu T is saying the rise has to come from the ground. People need to know what is going on at a ground level, and most of our people have no clue what is happening. I think that is a big part of the problem. I would agree with that. What say you, Brother Rasool?
What happens is, again, I'm going to refer to Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon has a point called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when someone has a particular view and cherishes that view, and when that view is attacked, they attack you. They fight back. Now we must look at the masses and what we call the masses and see if they are innocent. You know, are they as innocent as we assume them to be? Are they willing to be educated, you know, in the true sense of the word, or are they willing to cling to what they consider to be the true form? I think it was Eric Baldwin or someone who said there are 2% of the people who think, 3% of the people who think they think, and there are 95% of the people who will kill you rather than think.
Wow.
Now we cannot think that we go to people and they gratefully accept knowledge. You must remember that when Galileo came to his people and he told them the earth is round, they wanted to kill him. You know, so we have to look at an awareness and awakening that will not antagonize the masses, but at the same time awaken them that they do not create or cling to the old fallacies that they hold to be truths. Because if we convince them, try and convince them that they have been fooled, it's harder to convince a man that he has been fooled than convince him not to get fooled. So once someone has taken the bait, how do we get them off the hook? Because they fight you. It's like you see an animal injured on the street, or on the road, if you go and touch that animal, it bites you. It doesn't know you want to help it. It bites you because it's the only thing it knows. Wow. Now we have to look carefully and say, how do we do the education? How do we use the arts? How do we write the books? How do we do the plays? How do we get the media? How do we build the Pan-Africanist University? Because we might lose this generation. We might lose them because they might be the lost generation. But what are we going to do about the future generations? Our thoughts should be about the future. In business, they say, grow your market. Are Africans and Pan-Africanists growing their markets? Are they putting institutions in place that will ensure that tomorrow our thinkers come from a place where they are critical thinkers? They're not zombies, so to speak. Frantz Fanon, I'll quote him again, said, of all the things that he fears, his greatest fear is zombies. And I fear zombies too, because they attack you. So can we do education? How do we do education? We need to think of this thoroughly. We've got to understand how to do it and make it work and ensure that we don't have resistance to education. So we need to have education bottom up, but we've got to be very smart about it as well. I mean, there was someone like Malcolm X who was very educational, a very motivational speaker, but he was deemed to be a violent person. There's Frantz Fanon. They said he's a violent person because he disturbed the way people thought. And the easiest way was to label them as violent instead of listening to what they were saying. So we will get resistance according to education, and we've got to be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Let's pick up some more comments. Danny Benjamin is saying, greetings to you, Sister Shanice, and to Brother Russell, very important topic. Mr. Wilfred is saying, we have to educate our people on the psychology behind colonialism and imperialism. And that's precisely what Brother Russell was doing. And we need to think about the how as well. Wow. Jay is saying, this is a response to Senu. You are right. A lot of our people do not have a clue. And, our brother Russell challenges us on that to some extent. Are we playing the ostrich? Do some of those collaborators that our brother spoke about not realize that they're actually collaborating with treasonous leaders to the detriment of their people? Or are some of our people just so selfish that they only think of themselves? We've heard about the tools of colonialism and how they use the tools. Our brother, quite said a couple of times that imperialism is driven by economics. Is it economics that's driving imperialism? Because if I go back hundreds of years, what I see happening alongside this economic drive is a genocidal drive. Europe, for example, was occupied by Africans. Africans were the first people of Europe. Where are the Africans, the original Africans and the indigenous people of Africa now? The original people of Australia, look what happened to them. Okay, it may have been driven by economics. They've got full use of their country, all of their resources, all of their minerals and everything. But did they really have to wipe them out at the same time? Or is it also about taking control of the land? Is it about getting rid of the dark people across the entire planet and taking over? It's like being invaded by aliens who are coming in and wiping us out as a people and taking over our land, taking over our resources, taking over our minds even through their miseducation, and, leaving zombified people in their places who are just fodder until they have no use for those of us who are left, and they wipe out the rest of us. I kind of really feel as though we're in a very, very precarious situation during these times. And if future generations, if the next 1 or 2 generations don't wake up very soon, then the little bit of Africa that we've got left, that'll all be gone as well. Wow. Let me have some final words on what I've said there, Brother Russell, which I know was quite a lot, but what are your immediate thoughts on some of that, please?
Well, for us, the answer is analysis. Everything is analysis. Everything has to be done with clear analysis, and thoughtful people have to come to the fore and start designing the new Africa that we want. The new fight against imperialism, for example, colonialism, neo-colonialism. It means that our people have to look at their minds and say, how do we think? Do we think, or do we think? You know, because you may think you're thinking, but it's an engineered process where someone has taught you to think along a particular formation or path, and you think you're thinking, but you're not thinking, you are doing what they want you to do, and you think you're thinking. So everything is in our minds. Our minds, if we get our minds right, it will translate into our economics, into our social being, into our political being. And all these spheres are the spheres that we have to begin to deal with. Because if we want to get imperialism away from us, we have to look at development, we have to look at industrialization, we have to look at becoming a producer as opposed to a consumer, as opposed to a contributor. Now, when you talk about the psychology of the oppressed, for example, you will find that an African is more inclined to buy a bottle of Johnny Walker beer or whiskey than he would invest into a project that will bring about the change in the continent. If we had thought about this carefully, we would have had an African media company. We wouldn't be relying on CNN, BBC. Where is the African media company? You know, it should be here. If we were saying that we builders, where is the African Institutes of Higher Learning? Why aren't they here? Where's the Pan-African department within that's teaching us Pan-Africanism? What does Pan-Africanism mean? How do we understand Pan-Africanism? How do we implement Pan-Africanism? What are the pros and cons? We haven't even had that discussion because we have been taught that sloganeering about a problem is actually solving the problem, yet it isn't. So our minds need to be clear. Our minds need to become critical. We have to teach our people to be very critical thinkers, not obedient thinkers who get swayed by food parcels, for example, in our elections. Which African grouping asks their president, what are you going to do? And how do we measure what you do? And when can we remove you if you don't do what you do? We work on populism. If the man comes like a snake oil salesman, he gives you 1,001 promises, we put him in power and we can't get him off. It's the common problem. You go throughout Africa, you'll see it's exactly the common problem. Then what we do, we become consumers of Africanism, for example, the narrative of Africanism, that we backwards, we don't do things, we don't build. And that gets entrenched in our psyche. When that gets entrenched in our psyche, we don't build because our minds have already told us that we can't build. Therefore, when we look at our non-industrialization, for example, some Chinese has to come and build a factory in Africa. Why does a Chinese have to come and build a factory in Africa? What were we thinking? Didn't we look at the wood, for example, and say, in that wood are chairs, in that wood are benches, in that wood are even things as small as toothpicks? Why aren't we thinking that? Nigeria imports, I can't remember how much, but it's a couple of billions in toothpicks. Where's the Nigerian company that's doing that? Where are our engineers that can build our refineries, for example? We've got oil all over the country. Where's our refineries? We have sugar all over the country. Where are our refineries? Why aren't we refining? Why aren't we learning? Why aren't we embracing technology? With the end result, they take our resources, turn them into products and sell it back to us. And that's how they dominate us.
Time for change. Brother Rasool, it's been absolutely phenomenal listening to your presentation. Oh my gosh, so much learning there. We will be inviting you back because we definitely need a part 2. You raised so many really important questions there that I think we're going to have to face up to and answer. So I want to thank you so much, Brother Rasool. You're welcome to stay with us should you wish to do so. Family in the chat, oh my days, what did you think of our Brother Rasool's presentation there? Wasn't it enlightening? Wasn't it deeply insightful? Wow, we have got to do some deep thinking as a people. We're going to have to really begin to work out how we get ourselves out of this situation that we're in. And wow. You've put up the seat, Brother Russell. We've got our brother Kabala coming behind you. But let me just go over to the chat first and see what our people are saying there. So Sis Afrojamo, okay, there's lots of discussions going on between each other in the chat, talking about what's happened in some of the French colonies, the coups, Mali, Burkina Faso, for example, being anti-imperialists taking matters into their own hands. Is that the way forward? Rise up, everybody in the chat. Wow. Brother Russell, absolutely phenomenal. A lot of food for thought there. A lot of very deep food for thought, and it may be that our brother Kabala picks up as well on some of what you was sharing with us in his presentation today as well. But let's now go over to our brother Kabala. Welcome, brother Kabala. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, yes, sister. Thank you very much. Hoping you'll be able to hear me clearly now.
Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear, much better. Welcome. Our brother Kabala is with us all the way from the DRC in the Congo. How are things in the Congo?
Just like everywhere in Africa.
Elaborate. I'm not there. I want to get a sense of what life is like on a daily basis for our brothers and sisters in the Congo. Give me a little bit of the flavor of
we are surviving coronavirus. We don't really bother about mosque, and even though the predictions was that Africa would be devastated, so it seems like we are more resilient than the scientists thought. So that's the same way that we have been fighting for our poverty, for our hunger, for all our situation. We seem to be fighting the same way for COVID-19. Even though they have never wanted to assist us when it comes to poverty, when it comes to hunger, when it comes to other diseases that affect mostly poor people. But now,
and we won't mention that big V too much, otherwise, they'll not allow the video to stay up on YouTube.
But I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yes. So we are surviving anyway.
Yes, they don't want to assist us in any other way, but suddenly, they're very assisting when it comes to this one. What's in it? We may well ask, to assist them with their plan to take over our lands. Yes, my brother. And so the people are struggling to survive. I know the DRC is very, very rich with resources there. Are people enjoying an affluent lifestyle and the resources that they've got, or is that still very much controlled, as we were talking before, by the imperialists and those on the outside who have convinced us that we need them, to set up our factories and to manage our resources for us? What's the situation like at an industrial level?
Well, the land is rich, just like other countries in Africa as well. But one thing we need to understand is that anything that you possess, but you don't use, it doesn't belong to you. What belongs to you is what you are able to use. And the fact is that all those resources that we have in the Congo, the oil in Nigeria, or the uranium, I think in Mali or other countries, are being priced by foreign entities, precisely by the World Trade Organization, which is controlled by imperialists. Those are the ones who fix the price on our commodities and stuff like that. So literally or technically, we don't own those resources. And the liberation of Africa will begin from the moment that we own the land and we own our resources. And owning them, it means we are able to use and produce from them. So it is the same situation. If you talk about industry or industrialization in any African country, you will see that the faces behind the development or that industrial development are not black faces, are either Chinese or European people. And the black people are used in the factory lines where they are producing what the world wants and they cannot do without and they've never wanted to pay for. And when those industries or those factories actually move away, because that is the principle of capitalism, is to seek everywhere where the cheaper labor can be exploited to make more profits. When they move away, they leave behind them environmental deterioration, they leave away pollution in water, and the local population that were employed only for a short time in those industries, they leave them in precarity and a lot of sufferings. As you know, it is a situation everywhere where you have seen different countries having some industries, some manufacturing industries owned by European people. One example in the Congo is in 2005, there was this company called TFM. So this company, it got there. There was some mountains of coltans and a lot of minerals in the eastern part of Congo, or southern part of Congo rather. Those mountains were there for generations. They've never been removed. But that company got there. It was an American company. In less than 10 years, 3 mountains were already devastated because they went there searching for minerals and stuff like that. So after, as we're speaking now, that company is no longer functioning. It was sold to Chinese, and then Chinese, they are in and out and stuff like that. But the environment there, the local environment, is already polluted. Local people cannot produce, agricultural products that they used to produce there to survive, and they need now to go to the town and look for jobs, and that's the result of the so-called industrialization. So we need to be careful and to be more corporate, socially responsible, to know exactly how to create a balance in our exploitation of natural resources. And that is not the philosophy of capitalists, because it's all about profit and profit and profit, no matter what happened to the environment.
Wow, very devastating analysis there. And what I'm not hearing, which is very concerning, I suppose, is the strategy for change, but I'm sure we're going to be getting on to that. So just welcoming you once again, our young brother, the voice of the next generation. And so, this is such an important discussion because, we are analyzing and critiquing the situation that we're in today. And also very importantly, we need to be talking about what the future is going to be looking like. And towards the end of your conversation, hopefully I can bring back in our brother Rasul as well, where we talk about solutions. So family, rise up. Our young leader for tomorrow, brother Kabala, who is in the house. So brother Kabala, I know that you work in the field of community development. You're a community development strategist. You're also a mechanical engineer and also a member of the African Continental Unity Party. So, we're going to talk a little bit about those various strands of work that you're involved in and how you're impacting the community on the ground as well through your works, and, what your vision is from a young person's perspective for the future of Africa. So you spoke a little bit there about basically how capitalism is at work in the DRC to the detriment of the environment, to the detriment of the economic situation of the people there, to the detriment, of people's livelihood. I mean, it's not a good standing situation at all, but you're a development worker. You work within communities, help them to overcome some of the limitations. What are the sort of strategies that you feel that we ought to be putting in place to help the people, to overcome the exploitation that they're experiencing by these capitalist, usually foreign corporations that's coming into their regions and destroying their neighborhoods? And, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as though they've got the buy-in from the community to come in and do this. How do you allow someone to come into your backyard and destroy 3 mountains? What is the mindset of our people? What are we doing to, change the mindset? If we're not responsible for looking after the environment in our own countries, then who is? There's a lot in what I'm asking you to address there, my brother Kabala. So let me give you the platform to respond.
Oh, that's great. I think the elder, as I got him in, just like in his conclusion, he talked about education. And education, I think, is very important at this time. You know, we need education, and our people, the masses, have to be educated. One thing that you have to realize now is that whenever either politicians or on the media, everywhere, the mainstream, the narrative that is being pushed to the population is that we need to be good citizens to do whatever we can do in order to attract foreign investors to come and invest. And the foreign investors are just what I've just explained. So I believe that the development of Africa, the transformation or the liberation of Africa will be a process that I can call bottom-up process rather than top-down process. So even though the government has a responsibility to put in place structures that will facilitate the development and growth, but the population, the masses of the people are responsible for what the outcome or for what the future has to become. As just the elderly said, you know, it's easier for us to spend a couple of dollars to buy whiskey, to buy cigarettes that are being produced by foreign entities, not even by African people. But when it comes to do something that can obviously transform our communities, you see how black men begins to think twice and becomes reluctant in doing that, because we have that vision of here and right now. It means you want to enjoy right now, you want results right now, but we don't function in you know, in concordance or in relation to the nature and the natural laws that requires one to sow so that it can reap after a certain time, right? There are certain things that we need to do today for the result to be benefiting our kids and our 4 kids. But we, in most cases, we don't have that mentality. If we have it today or tomorrow, after tomorrow, you will see that we will be kicking out of our communities the shops that are being run by, I don't know, Chinese or Pakistanis in order to replace them with our own shops and then provide to our people what we need. Because we cannot talk about freedom if in our communities, those who provide food for us do not look like us. Those who provide education do not look like us. Those who provide, I don't know, whatever, do not look like us. So what are we doing? We're waiting for the government to come and do all of that. I don't think that is possible. So what we need, you know, in Africa, in African context generally, is to organize ourselves to begin now in every community, replacing all the supermarkets that are being owned by Chinese with our own supermarket. It's easy. We just have to find 1,000 people, 10,000 young men or young women, you know, in our local communities and come each with $20. We cannot really pretend that we can spend the whole month without even a $20, right? And put $20, you know, per month together, 10,000 of us, you can imagine what the figure will be. And eventually that can be able to set up a supermarket somewhere there and a shop in another area and stuff like that. That's how we can go about building ourselves in terms of community by shifting away from the philosophy of individualism. It's only from a collective effort from the masses that we can change Africa. That's why that's what I think is a way forward from the current situation. We cannot talk about the capitalists in our communities if we are not having a plan to replace them. And the plan to replace them is to forget the idea of foreign investors and to begin investing in ourselves.
Brilliant suggestion there. We have a brother that rings my shows regularly. His name's Brother Akram. What you've just said there towards the tail end would be music to his ears. He's all about cooperative economics, about how we can pull our resources together as a collective to do projects and initiatives that are far greater than what maybe any one of us would be able to do on our own. And that idea of 10,000 young people coming together, putting $20 a month together, you know, for a year or so, and all being part of, you know, a bigger business. That's incredible. It's phenomenal, and absolutely agree that that is part of the solution and a real plan. What do you think in the chat? family, give us some comments, give us some thoughts, and let us know what you're saying as well. Reigning Zion is saying, I love the idea. We do more if we set it up, or if he set it up. Maybe it's something you need to set up. Our brother Kabala, that's what's been suggested here. Mr. Wilfred saying the working environment in these factories and mines are often unhealthy. So true. And what's Papa Cheesy saying? Empowerment is needed, and a unified community. Wake up, African family. In certain parts of our motherland, our Kabbaland, the time is now. Bless up, one love, Ashe. So rise up, rise up. And Papa Cheesy was also saying that it's so sad, you know, the leadership has fallen off. The leadership has let us down dreadfully. But then, you know, we were hearing in the earlier discussion, you know, about the leaders being basically selected, being given lots of money to buy their voters. And that is something that we were talking about a couple of strongs ago with our brother Ras Cabria as well. He was talking about how the political system is financed basically by big business who are buying the politicians, financing their campaigns, and to the extent where it's so costly now to run for government that it's out of the reach of the ordinary person who might have a heart for the people to actually be in a position to afford to run for government. So that is a video that's and a show that's very worthwhile having. So Kwame is asking, have you started it, Kabala? I think everyone's liking your idea, and they're asking, have you started it? We need real leadership. Kabala, have you ever thought of maybe yourself starting that 10,000 youth initiative economic cooperative program?
Indeed, we have a plan, or actually a project like that in place. We have what we call Ubuntu Solidarity Project. It's actually a kind of an app that we have designed that anybody who is interested can obviously download it from the store, and obviously register and look all areas of investment that are available. We are right now on at the stage of funding for projects of transportation in Ghana, and after that we'll go to cassava plantation, still in Ghana, before we jump to other places. So we are busy chipping money. There are people in the US, in Africa, and England, putting money together to buy some buses for transportation in Ghana, as well as go into cassava plantation. So it's going to be a cooperative, collectively owned entity or enterprise. So we are already in the move, and we hope and believe that the ancestors will give us the power to get this initiative going through the whole continent of Africa. And we believe it's the only way we can alleviate our economic condition, by replacing ourselves with those who pretend to do for us what we are supposed to do for ourselves.
Wow, tell us a bit more about that. So it's what's the name of the project? Ubuntu
Solidarity Project.
Ubuntu Solidarity Project, and we can all buy shares in it, or we can all donate. Is it?
Yeah. Okay. It's not kind of donating. It's kind of contributing or buying shares. I think that's a proper technical word.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly. So
there are a number of projects, and we can select what projects we want to buy shares in. Is that right?
That's how it's gonna be. When you open the app is going to be launched. It's almost done. It's going to be launched, shortly, but it's operational anyway, underground for those who are interested. But it's going to be publicly launched shortly, in a sense that when you open it, you can see, you can browse per each country, like Congo, what kind of projects are available in the Congo, Ghana, Nigeria, and you will be funding the project or contributing to what is needed as a funding amount or capital to that project. And you're also going to be able to track your investment, how when it's done and how it's done, and obviously the potential return to that investment. So everything will be done or managed through the app. You know, it's age of technology, by the way. That's the idea.
Brilliant. Sounds absolutely brilliant to me. And you said it's already up and running. How long has it been running for? And how is the project progressing and developing on the ground already?
No, okay. At this stage, I said we are still at the stage of funding for the first project, which is the transportation. Okay. In Ghana, we are at this moment we're sitting. I think it's 45% of the total amount that we need to actually kickstart with the projects. So we have 45% already collected, and we're looking forward by the end or beginning of the next month to cover the remaining part and obviously start the projects.
Sounds amazing, absolutely fantastic. I mean, I don't know, I know you're at the technological age. If you're able to put something up on the screen, share screen and put something up on the screen to show us, you know, don't hesitate to do so that we can see what the app looks like, where we can go to get the app, how we can actually donate towards this enterprise. Because I'm sure for most of the people watching in the diaspora, even if it's $20 a month, you know, that's not really going to be much of a chip out of their shopping basket. We could be donating and buying shares and contributing towards the development of economic projects and initiatives on the continent. What a brilliant solution. I actually love the idea of that cooperative Ubuntu initiative. Wow, wow, wow. And so, you know, my young brother, I know you do community development work across Africa, various countries in Africa. We were talking before and you were saying, not only do you work in the Congo, you do work in Ghana and numerous other countries on the continent. You know, so yeah, you work across South Africa as well, Ghana, Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau. You know, what's the future like from your perspective? If you was to kind of critique and do an analysis of where we're at across those various African countries, because it's easy for us on the outside to look at the doom and gloom, but what's really happening on the ground? What's the energy like among young people to be the change that they want to see? I know you spoke about the older men who prefer to drink whiskey rather than contribute towards an initiative like this, or, you know, who maybe don't want to sow, but they just want to reap and they think of today and not tomorrow. But what is the mindset of the young people at the moment across the continent or across the countries that you've been working on at a community development level?
Well, overall, I must say that the situations are pretty much positive, but still requiring more efforts on our side to, the effort at the level of the threat that we are facing as African people, globally speaking. You know, if you remember some years ago in 2011, Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, was killed. And somehow, all of us in the continent, the narrative was Gaddafi was a dictator and need to be killed. And we supported that narrative. Now, recently, you will see the same situation again, almost happening in Ethiopia, whereby the government in Ethiopia was about to be overthrown by American and imperialists through the rebellion supports or funded, so to say. But if you see now, the narrative in Africa was perceived differently. The young people in Africa stood against that. They didn't fall in that trap that happened in 2011, whereby what the Western media says is what we all, is that how we interpreted the situation. So that is to say that the minds of African people is changing now. We are getting that understanding that the imperialist is not our friend. No matter how they can talk, no matter how they can advertise, they have never wanted to see us in a good shape or in a good position or developing as we need to be. So we are now locating what is our interest and where is our interest actually and how to find it. So that is actually, generally speaking, the mindset in Africa. Many people are waking up, understanding the reality, but it's not enough because knowledge, in most cases, people say that knowledge is power, but knowledge is not the power. Knowledge is only a potential power because You may know what to do in order to lose weight, for example, but until you begin to do something to lose weight, you're still going to suffer with obesity. You may also know that driving and texting is dangerous, but we have many people who happen to find themselves in accidents while they were texting and driving, while they knew that driving and texting is dangerous. So it means knowledge that you get does not serve you until you practice the knowledge. In other words, only applied knowledge is the power. So what is happening in Africa now is good that we know that imperialism is our enemy or is our problem, but we haven't been able to actually put that knowledge in motion in order to create certain activities that will bring fundamental change in the continent. That is where we are stuck at this moment with the, an African community, generally speaking. I'm looking at the people, African community abroad, in US, in England, in Africa. I see almost the same thing. We use knowledge as a weapon to attack and destroy other African people who have less knowledge than us. That's what we use knowledge for. We use knowledge as a weapon to obviously brag how knowledgeable we are and to undermine those who have less knowledge than us, and to project ourselves in a position of leaders and stuff like. But we don't have pragmatically actions or activities that have to bring a fundamental change, whether in the sector of economy, healthcare, education, and in all these areas where we have serious issues. That's where we are stuck, and that is what we have to overcome now in order to actually help Africa. In order for actually hope for Africa to be that Africa we need out of the 21st century. But if we are contenting ourselves only with the knowledge, with the theories and philosophies that we have never been able to put in practice, there's no hope for Africa out of the 21st century.
I hear you on that, my brother. So, more ideas for solutions, a more practical implementation of solution-orientated initiatives as well. What is your, view in terms of the leadership, and what can we do to help build and train new leaders who can be the leaders of tomorrow in Africa, my brother?
Well, we need to know, as you said in a comment right now, the current leadership in Africa is funded, is trained and funded to do a particular job. And one thing in particular that we can realize or that we can analyze about the current leadership in Africa is that there are certain leaders who have good mindsets, who want to do good things, but they are afraid of the imperialism. They are afraid because they know what can happen to them if they attempt to do something that benefit the people. So they, in order to protect themselves, in order to be good leaders, to gain some marks, in the international institutions that are obviously marking good leaders. And those good leaders means the leaders who align themselves with Western philosophy, at the detriment of their own population. So this is a situation. And I don't tend to blame completely the leaders for the situation in which they find themselves, because it's a kind of inertia where you find yourself and being trained by that inertia, you cannot stop against it suddenly because it's going to crush you. You rather escape it, but by following its motion. But that's technical context. But what I'm saying is that we share the responsibility, us as the masses and the leaders. What we have to do as a people, we need to make sure that we create a context or a situation of fear, the same way that the leaders are afraid of the imperialists. We must also make sure that they are also afraid of the general population. So in that case, they will find themselves in the middle. So those who cannot satisfy either us, they have to obviously exit themselves, because they would have failed their mission. In other words, what I'm trying to say, we must create a context, because in most cases, the leaders who misbehave, they do misbehave with a license given by the population. So if we can create the same context, the same picture that the leader have of the West, in a way that if they do what the West doesn't want, the West will off them. They must also realize that if they don't do what we want as the masses, we will off them. That's the reason why I do congratulate a kind of revolution that is happening in French-speaking Africa now, in Mali, Burkina Faso, in Guinea, is a good thing. The leaders must realize that if they don't really take care of the population, at some point the population must tend to them and obviously off them, as is happening now. I think that's how that's how we can go about changing the situation, by creating leaders who are responsible and leaders who are accountable. And secondly, before I finish, one thing is that we want leaders who respond to our problems, but we have never been ready to fund their campaigns or to promote their campaigns or even to support their campaigns. We never ask the questions of where are they coming with the money, because we know that political campaigns are very expensive, but we don't ask questions of where are they getting money to actually run their campaigns. All that we just want rhetorics, and then we vote, and we begin to complain because we don't get what we expected. And obviously we cannot get what we expected because we didn't support, we didn't sponsor, and we didn't fund the leader and his program. There's a difference between the one who elects and the one who selects. The one who selects gives a mandate and gives a support, but the one who only elects, he elects a candidate who has been selected by other people, and he has been selected on a specific mandate that he has to accomplish, and that is not always the mandates of the population. That's what we need to understand. Therefore, again, education is very important, because until our people understand these things, how politics works, we will be always played with or manipulated, as we have been for the past 50 years of the, Africa post-independence.
Yes, indeed, my brother. I agree with you on all of that. Let's hear what some of our audience in the chat are saying at the moment. Papa Cheesy is saying the leaders need truthful security around them. Bless up, one love, know thyself and thy creator with much respect. Absolutely agree. How do we secure good leaders? In my opinion, President Magufuli was a phenomenal leader. He was a great leader for Tanzania. You know, he was a leader who was putting the interest of his country first, the interest of his people first, using the resources of his country for his people. You know, the corporations and the external imperialists, those so-called investors that want to go into the countries, didn't like it. And look what happened. Look what happens to our good leaders. Even if, as you're suggesting, which I think is a really good idea, we develop strategies, you know, such as the funding scheme that you talked about for financing and selecting our own leaders. How do we protect them? How do we protect those leaders? And I absolutely agree with what you were saying as well, that we need to make those leaders more fearful of what the population will do to them if they don't implement the policies and the programs on behalf of the population. Then they are fearful of the imperialists and what they will do to them if they don't, you know, pander to their agenda. And, you know, listening to all of what you were saying there, you know, and it's been said in the chat as well, just makes me so hopeful for the mindset of our future generation. If all of the young people had that mindset that you have, you know, we would be dealing with what our brother Rasul was talking about earlier, you know, the kind of psychological deprived mindset that we have at the moment, to the extent where we're oppressing ourselves as a people. We would be overcoming that situation. Let's go to the chat, see what people are saying. They're bigging you up, saying, love this brother. Senyu T saying, love the brother. To do that, he said, the general population should have knowledge on the ground. Sister Afrojamo is just bigging up Mali in the house as well. Also, I forgot to ask, please make sure that you do like the video as well. As you come into the chat, please do give us a thumbs up and a like. Enough fire for our young Kabala, loving your contribution. Sean Charles says, if this is our next generation, we are in good shape. Absolutely agree. Sean Child is saying, let us support them. Agree indeed. Each one teach one, says Papa Cheesy. And also big up to the next generation of Africa that have awoken to the colonials and their mental illness. Much respect go out to the youths. Absolutely have to agree with you on that, Papa Cheesy. And, you know, Yes, the message is received by virtual oath. You know what that is, might try and hinder the plans. That is their agenda as well. And Afrijamo is saying, yes, the Ubuntu Solidarity Project in the DRC want to support. We must support that initiatives. I think we must, talk a bit more about that in the near future as well. Kimani is saying, yes, Brother Kabala, excellent plan. Collective works and responsibility. Kwame saying, is the app just for Africans, Kabala? I think you've said, no, it's not just for Africans, but please do qualify that. It's all about us empowering ourselves, says Brother Kamani. And Brother Kwame and Sister Afrijama saying, yes, let's get our money together. And Kabala is the only one person. It's only one person. How about we all come on board? How about everybody who watches this video coming on board and, committing to $20 a month or even a one-off $20, that's going to be injected into this really excellent initiative, Ubuntu Solidarity Project. Let's hear your response, Brother Kabala, to some of the comments in the chat, and then I'd like to bring in Brother Rasul towards, to help wrap up and contribute to some of what he's been hearing you talk about today. But first of all, what is your response to our audience, to the comments from our audience?
Well, the first thing that I want to say is that if everyone comes on board and put the resources together, there will be revolution tomorrow, because many things will change. It's that stage where we are stuck at the moment. It's organization. We are a single group of people, or a race of people, actually, in this world that is very disorganized. And it's because we have adopted very much the idea of individualism that we have embraced from the education, Western education that we have gone through, and the media. Everything preach about individualism. Individual rights is actually projected more than collective rights. While in the African traditional system, collective rights is above individual rights, because everyone is as powerful as his community where he comes from is. If you're coming from a weak community, no matter how much money you have, even if you're coming from Barack Obama's family, you're going to be still treated like just another black man or another Negro with no value at all. But if you're coming from a strong community, a community that is responsible, that makes things happen, then obviously you're going to be evaluated with the same level that your community has projected. So I had a gentleman asking, how can we protect the good leaders? Well, I will say a good leader does not need protection, because a good leader cannot be attacked. And a good leader I'm talking about is the vision. One of the problems, or one of the difficulties that we have heard in Africa so far, is because we have centered our initiatives or our struggles on individuals rather than on the vision. And it's easy to destroy an individual who carries an agenda, and by killing him, obviously, you can compromise the whole agenda or the whole movement that he was obviously campaigning for. But if we can center our activities, our effort, our struggle on the vision, and let the vision lead, and all of us should follow the vision, it's going to be difficult to kill that vision as a leader, because you can never kill a problem. You can only kill the person who actually struggled for the problem, but you never, as long as the problem is still there, other people will come. In other words, you may kill a revolutionary, but you cannot kill the revolution. So let us make the vision the leader. That is a new way we can obviously change Africa, because we are facing strong forces of imperialism. We are facing atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs, and all these kind of bombs that they are making. We shouldn't be mistaken about it. They don't make them for animals, they make them for human beings. Whenever you begin to challenge the power structure, the capability of capitalism to exploit the masses. Obviously, you must understand the pressure or the situation that is facing you. But if we put a vision in forefront of us, nobody can kill the vision. And all of us, we stay behind the vision and we follow the vision. And once we follow the vision, we find ourselves where we are supposed to be and doing what we are supposed to do. That's what I can say from the comments that I've heard so far.
Absolutely brilliant. Oh my gosh, let us make the vision the leader. You can kill the leader, but you can't kill the vision. Let's follow the vision. Absolutely love that. Brother Rasul, let's bring you back in here, my brother. You've been hearing, you know, the voice of a young person on the continent. What say you, Brother Rasul?
I agree with a lot that has been said, and I agree with the fact that unless the people are empowered, unless the people are liberated in their minds, you're not going to have a positive outcome for the continent. I was just worried about that comment that 3 mountains were destroyed. You know, that's a very disturbing scenario where an external company comes into the country, destroys 3 mountains, and the people are simply workers. You know, that's a terrible scenario. That's a scenario where we have now been trained to look for jobs and look for investment, and we haven't yet looked at ownership. We haven't yet looked at self-development. We have not built the kind of enterprises that we should build that can move mountains, so to speak. It also speaks to me about the values of our people, the values of our people ecologically, because ecological imperialism is part of the problem, where people come, they destroy, they denude the earth, so to speak, and leave it as is, and the local people suffer. Now, one cannot talk about this without looking at government and saying, who gave these people the consent? Who gave them the permits? What did the people do in relation to this, or were they happy with just the jobs? You know, so the cycle, the entire psychological cycle of trading your resources to get a job is one of the worst things that happened around imperialism. And it's one of the velvet gloves over the steel fist that they show to us. Now, I find it very, very ironic and oxymoronic that someone can come and tell you, you work for me to dig your gold so I can take it away. You know, I've never, it's something that's oxymoronic. Believe me, by doing it, you're trying to negate something else, yet you're killing yourself in the process. It's like saying, let me commit suicide to save myself from death. You know, it's this kind of logic, an illogical logic that's in our minds that makes us do this all the time. And the politicians harp on this because we only want jobs. We don't want to develop. We don't want to invest. We don't think macro investment. With the end result, the politician sees us that we think small, and he can't get a benefit from us thinking small. He can't provide the kinds of things that he wants to do because we don't. And until we begin to macro think, we're going to be at the bottom of the barrel. For example, our taxes, can our taxes do the roads? It's a cycle that happens. If we think small, we can't pay enough taxes. If we can't pay enough taxes, the government can't develop. And if we think small, we're back into the same cycle of thinking small. When you begin to talk about a country, you have to look at the macro levels of the country. What sort of GDP does it have? What sort of backbone to the GDP does it have? What sort of intervention do you design? You know, we've got to begin to think big. Africa is big. It's bigger than Europe, for example. And one is really astonished that we're at the bottom of the financial and economic ladder when we could have developed and developed fast. Paul Kagame is doing very well in Rwanda. He's doing a marvelous job. Gaddafi did a marvelous job. You know, but what happened? We turned around and we sold out Gaddafi. You know, it was us, the countries like South Africa voted against the no-fly zone. The no-fly zone meant Gaddafi would be killed. So when Gaddafi was killed, did the African masses get up and say we lost someone who was driving our process? No, they didn't. They went back to the marketplace and started buying fruit. You know, so our political awareness is very far from us. Our political cognition is very far from us. The economies of scale are not in our minds. We think small. We think of running a truck shop. We don't think of being the massive wholesaler that supplies the truck shop. And we're losing the game. We're losing the ball, not because we don't have the thoughts, but we don't have the thoughts at the right level. When imperialism comes, it comes and it talks billions, it talks trillions. And we haven't even gotten into that game yet. We're still standing outside the soccer field. So we need to begin to think big. We need to begin to have macro projects. We need to begin to understand, what does development mean? What does ecological development mean? For example, if we, for example, say we want to mine, let's start mining, because we will look after our own environment. We will look at rehabilitation after mining. But if we say someone else is going to mine and they're going to employ us as jobs and give us jobs, then of course we're asking for trouble. So half the problem is with us, half the problem is with the government, and half the problem is us opening the door to the imperialists.
Okay, thank you.
Open the door.
Thank you so much for that response there, Brother Rasool. We need to be thinking on a macro level. We need to now put in the mindset of our young people that we are the ones who are going to be the business owners. We are the ones who are going to be supplying the stores, the supermarkets, and supplying even the investors. We've got to start thinking big. We have got to be thinking beyond just a job. A job is not enough. And we've got to also realize that we are the ones who are responsible for our environment and maintaining our environment as well. Let's go over to the chat for some final comments, and then I'm going to bring back in our brother Kabala for some final remarks in response to some of what our brother Rasool has said. In the chat, they're saying, true that family empowerment, know thyself, Ashe. I'm just going to put your mic on mute there because we're getting some feedback from you, my brother. Thank you so much. And yeah, Abina Maroon said, yes, we should be the leaders we want to see. Ownership must be ours. We don't want outsiders or overseers. We must be in the driving seat, the decision makers, controllers of our own destiny. Absolutely agree with you on that. Abini says no more colonialism, neo-colonialism, or imperialism, or any other ism or schism. Agree with that as well. Papa Cheesy is saying a crime against mother, father, nature. I think that's in response to the destruction of the three mountains. Absolutely. You know, I just like to say, because I often say this on my radio show, you know, we as a people have got to take responsibility for the environment. We are the protectors of the environment. We are the ones who've got to protect the animal kingdom. We are the one who's got to protect the insect world. We are the ones who've got to protect the marine life as well. We've got to make sure that people are not coming into our waters and dreading all of the fishes and everything that's living out of our sea waters. We've got to make sure they're not coming onto our land and totally destroying the environment, cutting down all of the trees, digging out all the minerals and resources, and leaving our continent in a state of despair. We've got to make sure that even the products that we are being given and we are being sold and we are being told to use in our agricultural processes is not depleting the nutrition of the land, is not killing off all of our insects, is not likely to leave our land barren and cause famine in 10 years' time. We've got to be really careful and be the ones who are testing all of the products that's being used on our land. Our animal kingdom, we cannot allow people to come in and use our animals as game. You know, I'm sure the world must have heard about the big case against a footballer for kicking a cat. And here we have, you know, so-called tourists coming to the continent and shooting giraffes and lions and elephants and deers, you know, for sport, you know, time for change. We are the ones that's got to be in the driving seat, as has been said in the chat. And, you know, let's one or two comments here. Yes, like Marcus Messiah Garvey, you cannot kill a good idea. Loving the fact that the leader is the vision. The vision is the leader and not the leader that is the vision. Get it the right way around. And welcome Bermuda in the house as well. Brother Kabala, you know, phenomenal contribution. Let's allow you to respond to some of what our brother Rasul has said, some of the comments in the chat, and to wind up, because already, you know, we are at the top of the hour. Brother Kabala, unmute yourself.
No, correct. No, correct. I do appreciate what my elder Russell said. I think is completely right. And I define that in two issues or in two categories. I think is what actually make a difference between people who are successful in this world or nations that are successful in the nation that are not successful. And that difference is the vision and ambition. In most cases, us as African people, we are still operating on ambition. We are driven by ambition. And every time that you are driven by ambition, you have an ideal. It means you have another entity that you have to imitate in order for you to drive your ambition to do what they are doing, to, you know, to meet up with them and to catch up with them, something like that's what ambition is about. But for people who have a vision, who are driven by a vision, are the people who go deep in their imagination and create something unique, you know, related to their own situation, and begin to pursue that or the execution of that ideal which they've created in their mind. They don't have to imitate other people. They don't have to be a copycat of other people. They are themselves doing things for themselves. For example, I'll give you an example. I think 2 days back in Senegal, they were celebrating a stadium, for soccer stadium that were built there. And one has to ask himself, why do we have to celebrate a stadium that has been built to the standards of European stadium? Simply because it is an ambition. We want to do what Europeans have done. They have built good stadium, then we build also good stadium. But that is not a vision. A vision should be make you, unique. A vision should be make you unique in a way that you sit down, you go deep in your imagination, you decide, okay, you know what? There's nobody who has ever go to the sun. I'm gonna go to the sun, and you begin to build there. Everything that you do is for you to get to the sun, not to become like a copycat of other people. Because Dr. John Henry Clark told us, every time that you think for you to become better, you need to imitate other people. You are making yourself a slave of those you are imitating. Whether you have, they build a jail for you or not, the psychological jail or the psychological chains of your mind are very important than any steel that can bind you. So we need to understand that. I agree completely. We need to understand that we only have to get a vision that can now obviously motivate our actions, instead of having ambitions to transform Congo to Belgium or to transform Senegal to France, or literally to making ourselves little British, little French, and little Portuguese, according to who colonized you. So, and every time that you want to imitate everyone, anybody, you're never going to be equal to them. You can only, or you cannot even be more than them. You can only come near, to them, but not equal or more than them, because you are imitating them, you are following them. So we need to understand this thing very well in order to make sure that Africa that we want tomorrow is Africa that is Africa of people who have vision and people who are successful. And particularly, one thing that have to be understood is that we, at this generation, we are a key generation that can bring a change that Africa needs. If we miss it, there will probably not going to be a chance for Africa to rise again. And the reason I'm saying that is because we are, some of us today, some of our generation, including yourself, as I'm seeing in this audience, we have seen a world without a smartphone, smart cars, smart TV, smart whatever. So if I had a need to come to you, like my sister Shanice, I was going to come to you organically, interact with you organically. We had a patience, you know, because we didn't have a smart and fast world as we're having it today. So kids who are born today, they never know something like organic relationship because everything is done through technology. They're never going to know something like organic food because you have GMO now flooding the markets. They were never going to know patience because now you click, you know, your phone, you have response for anything that you need. So they will never going to know the world as we knew it. So we are the ones who can lay the foundation for a new Africa that we want, an Africa whereby we have a true love, we have a, you know, a spirit of Ubuntu and spirit of collectivism and Pan-Africanism, because now those who coming after us, they never have a chance to see that picture, and they will never gonna obviously create something like that, because now we are coming into a society that is more kind of robotized. So that is just to emphasize that we are a key generation, and everything that you have can be a tool that can be used to liberate Africa. It's good for you to have a job. It's good for you to have your religion. It's good for you to have your education. It's good for you to have your political party. But your life and my life will never change until we embark collectively in the politics of our liberation, or we can still enjoy the politics of our oppression. Peace and power. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Before you go, Brother Kabala, I just want to bring in a comment here by Agators, Rise Up Agators, that says the space between being a seed and being a tree requires the trust that the seed is already the tree. It just
Beautiful.
needs to become. So that it's the tree that it just needs to become. And, you know, we're going to be trusting in your initiative. Someone has asked if you could please provide information again about the app and how we can sign up and join the app. Is there something that you could quickly post in the chat as well? So, but first, please tell us.
Well, what I can put now, it's only the ACUP, you know, what you call, is not, okay. The best way to do is anyone who is interested can get in touch with me, obviously, and I will obviously give him a relevant information, because I don't have anything on this laptop that I'm using now. All the stuff are in my phone, and I don't know how to obviously get them on the chat.
All righty. And
yes.
If you could post the information in the description under the video as well, that would be really helpful.
Like where I can, I don't know, I can post my, I mean, the email address, email address where people can inquire information.
Yeah, go ahead and post your email address in the chat. But also, when you come out of this video, underneath the video itself, as a comment, put the link and the details to the Ubuntu project. A brilliant initiative. And, you know, if everyone that watches this video can support it in some shape or form, as you said, it would be revolutionary. The revolution would start tomorrow. So the revolution is in our hands. Really, exactly. We are, you know, the ones who are stopping ourselves, as Brother Rasul was saying, from moving forward and progressing, because, you know, we are just psychologically damaged, really, and have been indoctrinated with an imperialist mindset, which is a selfish mindset, which is all about self and not the collective. But the day we start working together as a collective, the day we start pulling all our resources together, the day we start financing our leaders and also recognize and get behind a vision as a people, which is a bigger, on a macro level, far greater than, you know, any European vision that they could put in our minds. That's the day we're going to begin to see Africa grow and become great again. We're going to be leaving it there, but please do join us next strong. To everybody in the audience, thank you so, so much for joining us today. Next strong, we've got our brother Elder Bafu and Kuma, and he is oh my gosh, he's a phenomenal. He's a former editor of the New African newspaper as well. So, and he's been the editor of numerous newspapers, so written articles, interviewed so many leaders. You know, he's going to be with us next strong, so lots of questions to ask him. I want to thank you for the discussion that's been going on, the conversations that you've been having in the chat. I want to thank our brilliant, esteemed guests, our brother Rasul Cinnamon, and also our brother Kabala Harpies. Thank you both so much. To everyone, more power, more strength, and all being well, we'll see you next strong. Keep it locked to the Sister Shanice Show, and please share the link. Let everybody know we are Black. Thank you so much, family. Thank you so much. One love. One love.